This interview is sponsored by Carwash Advisory, an M&A advisory firm that focuses exclusively on car washes. For more information, please visit carwashadvisory.com.
Welcome back to Wash Talk, the Carwash Podcast. I'm your host, Rich DiPaolo, and joining me today is Harry Caruso, founder and CEO of Carwash Advisory. Welcome back to Wash Talk, Harry.
Thanks, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, sounds good. Well, as you know well by now, we tend to begin our podcast episode with what we call the Wash Talk Basic Package question. It helps us and our audience get to know you a little bit better, Harry. So to start us off today, interested to know, what is your favorite make or model of car? Hey, Car Wash fans. Before we get started, be sure to hit the like button below and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate you supporting our channel. And now, back to our interview with Harry Caruso.
My favorite make and model of car, Rich, is a 1963 split-window coupe Corvette.
Okay.
Because I wasn't allowed to touch it as a child.
Okay. Do you own one now?
No.
Okay. So today's episode, Harry, there's so many different dynamics going on in the car wash industry and how these chains are choosing to scale and grow, right? So wanted to catch up with you today to discuss some of the benefits of acquiring an existing wash versus building a new wash completely, right? So first, before we start off, let's talk about where these car washes are acquiring and building. It seems like decades ago, there was almost a gentleman's agreement that you weren't going to build within a 3 to 5 miles radius of a good operator or really any car wash, right? There was that unspoken gentleman's understanding. But it seems like these car washes nowadays have no pause to build right across from another existing wash. So why are car washes choosing to build so close to other car washes these days?
Yeah, Rich, so this is a great question. It's a question I get and we get at Carwash Advisory constantly. Because what you're seeing, to your point, is you're seeing individuals spending $5 million to erect a tunnel, express exterior across the street from another pre-existing tunnel who doesn't do bad business in a demographic and geography that arguably was just fully mature and saturated by the single wash. Why are they doing that? Is it to split the pie? And then there's even more, optically egregious cases where the demographics don't even make sense to split. So what the heck is going on? And the most fascinating thing, and we're in really such a fortunate position at Carwash Advisory because we get to talk to so many owner-operators, regardless of whether or not they're selling, all day, every day. We get to hear their anecdotal stories and their narrative around, oh, there was a new one of these types of washes that was built across the street or down the road and this and that. And the read-through is, and it's from an academic standpoint absolutely fascinating, is that there's actually an elasticity in car wash customers that has yet to be, quantified, but more importantly, we don't know where the bottom of it lies. In other words, how deep does this go? So in instance, let's say we have one wash making $1 million, right? Somebody builds across the street. Let's say this wash goes to $750. Mm-hmm. Well, this one gets $752. So how'd you take $1 million of wash revenue and turn it into $1.5 million?
Right.
And the answer is, and this is, impossible to directly attribute, but bottom line is more people are washing their cars, right? And I used revenue, but you can use car count, if you will, to go ahead and get rid of the assumption of ticket price as a variable. And it's fascinating because people are willing to build right across the street from each other under the presumption that, I don't need to take half of this person's car count because by having two and offering better services as an industry as a whole, more people are going to wash their car. So in a way, you're creating your own customer base. So that's largely what's going on with this sort of trend.
So what do you tell those operators who come to you with the frustration of, hey, I've been in business X amount of years, all of a sudden this car wash opened up across the street from me. What advice do you give those operators who are dealing with these situations?
Yeah, so Rich, I have a tendency to be over personal in terms of advisory, right? So like there's probably an objectively correct answer, but I think it's really situational. So to me, it comes down to, hey, are you in this for the next 10 years? How about 20 years? If the answer to either of those is yes, don't worry or bat an eye at it. It's going to be annoying, but it's going to be a gnat, right? That you have to just get away from you. It's not going to be long-term detrimental because somebody who's poured, their sweat, their tears, their years into their businesses, they're not going to just all of a sudden be trumped by somebody who's offering $1 less in terms of wash price. That's not the way it works. It's largely a service business. I think that for those who may or may not be thinking about getting out in the near to midterm, it becomes more of a question of, is the heartache worth the benefit? Because it's going to be like having a gnat. And that gnat can be pretty annoying if you don't get rid of it.
Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the pros and cons of building versus acquiring a wash, but let's just talk about costs for now. If I'm an operator and I'm looking to grow my chain, right, and I'm interested in a certain market, what are the cost comparisons of me building a brand new wash versus acquiring a new one or acquiring an existing wash?
Yes, this is the first time in history where current multiples are, where parity, if you will, is out of whack in terms of the cost bases. Now, first and foremost, the number one thing that we need to do is we need to get land out of the equation, right? So everything we can talk about on a pure cost basis has to be net of land. Otherwise, it's geographic specific, and it can be. I have certain operators that are paying $4 million for a literal plot of dirt to build a wash, and others that are doing phenomenally well on a $300,000 lot. So geography specific. When you get rid of land, what you're talking about is on the build side, $3 to $4 million. Can it be done for less for somebody who's really, really knowledgeable and has done it before? Yeah, of course it can. That's what you get in terms of the tricks of the trade, if you will. But for a first-time owner-operator to build a, let's just say, express tunnel, $3 to $4 million plus land.
Is it better to acquire a mediocre car wash with some potential, or a great car wash that's kind of reached its potential?
Rich, you kill me. These are philosophical questions. All right, so let me caveat this with saying anybody who's successful in this industry is not lucky. This industry is a tremendous amount of work. And it might be easy to look from the outside, especially from an investor standpoint, and say, how hard could it be? I'm just throwing some chemical and water on a car. Well, it's not. It's actually a services industry that so happens to throw water and chemical on a car. It's the exact opposite, right? And you learn that all too fast, or you didn't know, and you get yourself in trouble. So in terms of buying a mediocre wash and turning it around versus buying one that's at its peak and it's full. So here's where there's actually three shades here, Rich. I would say that there's the ultimate incredible operator, which I'll talk about with one person in mind who just exemplifies this. We have the great operator, and then we have a subpar operator. Okay, and each of them present different opportunities. Depending on whether or not you're confident in your ability to turn it around, if you are, your best return is always going to be the underperforming wash. Always, right? Because you're not paying up for cash flow that previously existed. You're getting it for free and you're creating it. Those are very, very, very frequent. The next group, which is a good operator or a great operator, also very frequent and always a great option, and it mitigates the risk between the two. The funny thing is the third group is that you brought up, which I'll call the penultimate operator, which we've all met before. Everything is custom, dialed into a T. They spent years perfecting their wash. There's actually, in many ways, if they can teach you their ways, fantastic. It doesn't get better. If they can't or won't, there's downside to it because nobody's going to run that wash as well as that person, ever. How could you, right?
Right.
So in a way, you're not buying a wash at its peak to keep at its peak. It's only got one way to go from there unless they're willing to train you, in which case it's worth an inordinate more.
Okay. It's so important to know these washes that you're building across from our buddy John Roush from Express Wash Concepts, right? He told me not too long ago that the good operators are good for a reason, and if you're just going to build in the market so close to these great operators, they're going to kick your butt most of the time. So, yeah, for those looking to build car washes and saturate a market, just really understand what the competition is, right? So, all right, I'll end the philosophical questions there. Let's talk a little bit, a couple of black and white questions here. How about, what are the pros and cons of building a new car wash as opposed to acquiring one?
So I think that when you compare building and buying, right, there's nuances, right? You don't have to do as much diligence on building because there's no pre-existing stuff to examine, per se. But when you really boil it down, there's only really two factors at play. And the biggest one is you're trading time for price. And that's how it should be. And that's the earlier alluded to parity that exists or doesn't exist in today's market. Taking 2 years of time risk in terms of making a full build, if you're not somebody who's, built 10 of these, 20 of these, 100 of these before, is extraordinarily difficult to price, right? Because 2 years of time risk, not only do you have the time risk of generality by way of your life situation, what's going on, you have increased risk by these people who might be building across the street from you. And now you're taking 2 years of that. So the biggest difference is building will give you more exposure to time risk, but a better return if you do it properly. And the other is that when you buy, you cannot set it up exactly the way you want it. When you build, it's like building a house. It's that simple, right? You put the faucet where you want in the bathroom, you have the extra staircase, whatever you want is yours, it's built for you. So two biggest differences are time risk and customized.
Okay. Now, on the flip side, what are the pros and cons of buying a car wash as opposed to building?
So, there's the obvious factors, which is instant cash flow. Day one, you're stepping into a cash flowing business. To me, though, those are all rather boring, right? You have an established track history, fine. What is the real difference? And oftentimes people, don't take for granted, or they take for granted, but they really shouldn't, is the prior owner.
Okay.
I can't tell you how I would possibly quantify a knowledgeable, good past owner who's willing to talk and train. To me, that's very difficult to put a monetary value on, but is the most nuanced yet important factor and benefit of buying rather than building.
Okay, interesting. We often focus on market saturation, which we were discussing before, right? Can you give our audience an idea of what type of markets you're out there seeing, what areas are reaching that saturation point, and which areas have the most potential for, we hear white space in the industry or most growth potential for washes out there?
Yeah, it's also something that we get asked quite often, and it's a really good question, Rich. So what I will say is that before giving you exact answers, you can't do it state by state. You literally can't, because take, northern New Jersey versus southern New Jersey, or take one side of a state versus, take Shreveport, Louisiana versus New Orleans. They're different markets. They're totally different markets. They might as well be in different states. The arbitrary lines make no difference, none. So when evaluating oversaturated areas or, blue sky opportunities, what somebody should be looking at is a local demographic. You should really be looking at like a 20, 25 mile radius in terms of saturation, and for more metropolitan areas, even a smaller radius. In terms of those that I don't personally understand, I don't understand Toledo, just because we're in Ohio. Right. And I don't understand it because maybe I'm, missing something, or maybe it's because people get their cars washed inordinately more times per day than anywhere else in the country. But there's a lot of fantastic operators in Toledo, a lot. I think the biggest pointable example would be that of Phoenix back in the last sort of boom, right? And maybe Grand Rapids. But today, there's no pinpoint geography where I see complete and utter oversaturation.
Okay, interesting. Well, I really appreciate you joining us on this podcast episode, Harry. Our guest today has been Harry Caruso of Carwash Advisory. For more information about his company, please visit carwashadvisory.com.